Greetings, Exile. It's me, the guy who continues to make off-meta trash builds that nobody, literally nobody, asks for. Bringing you the first real update for my league starter, the Holy Sweep. In this video, I will tell you guys about how the skill works, how I scaled it, and how I fixed the single target damage, and what upgrades I will be making for the min-max version of this build going forward. We have quite a lot to cover, so let's get started. Holy Sweep is a new and improved version of Sweep. It no longer has knockback on hit, has much lower attack damage scaling, and can now only be used with maces and staffs. But as a trade-off, it now has 50% of its damage inherently converted to lightning, and random enemies struck by it are hit with holy hammers which deal 35% less damage. But these holy hammers can only strike 5 targets per skill use. This limit can be increased to 8 targets if the gem has 20% quality. Both the initial sweep and the hammers that fall from it have their own area of effect, so they can easily be scaled with area of effect modifiers to cover the entire screen in a single swing. And now, since we are scaling area of effect modifiers, what better class than Juggernaut, who is not like Unyielding, which provide massive area of effect scaling if we stack enough endurance charges. Since we are stacking endurance charges now, we also gain a lot of damage reduction against both physical and elemental hits. But as we know, Juggernaut is a pretty defensive class. He's no berserker, he does not have insane attack speed or even attack damage scaling, so we definitely lack in the damage department. And this lack of damage hurts us the most when it comes to single target. Even though single targets are always struck by Holy Hammer, it's still not enough. And things like Hydro Spear can only help to a certain extent, as Hydro Spear can only be hit once per second. So if we have an attack rate of less than 1 second, the interaction becomes pretty much irrelevant. So when it comes to single target, the build becomes truly ZDPS, and no one wants to play a build that takes several minutes just to kill a boss or a strong rare. Nor do I want to present you guys with a build that straight up feels bad to play. So although I initially planned to make this budget version of build as budget friendly as possible, so it could even be played in SSF, it was just not possible. Don't get me wrong, you can still get to tier 16 maps in SSF, but a single target will always be lacking until you make these improvements. So as I had mentioned earlier in my League Starter video, I finally started using the combination of specific uniques. These uniques being An's Anguish and Ralakisha Impatient boots for endurance charges. Now, many of you have been really confused about how the boots actually work, so let me clarify this for once and for all. While you have Ralakisha Impatience boots equipped, you count as having your maximum number of specific charges. So even if you don't have a single charge, you still get the benefit of having all of them. This interaction allows to convert all of these endurance charges into brutal charges, which provide 3% damage to deal triple damage and 10% increased stun threshold per brutal charge. Since we currently have a total of 10 endurance charges in this build, you get 30% chance to deal triple damage and 100% increased stun threshold. And keep in mind, whenever the initial swing deals triple damage, all the hammers that drop from it will also deal triple damage. None of us wants to wait around for like 10 seconds for these charges to fill up. So to make acquiring these charges easier, we use Enduring Cry, which gives us 5 endurance charges instantly when fighting boss, on top of providing some massive health regeneration for the buff duration. And to make sure we never lose these charges, I've rolled an exact implicit on my body armor that grants 1 endurance charge every 15 seconds. If we combine this with the charge mastery for increased duration, we get a total duration of 20 seconds, so the charges are always refreshed before they run out. On top of all this, I've made even more significant improvements. To increase our maximum endurance charges, we are now using Circle of Regret Topaz Ring, which provide increased maximum endurance charges as an implicit. These rings are not very cheap, but they're not extremely expensive either. They're much better option than Chaos Sign because we can get modifiers like increased lightning damage or even buff effect while affected by Herald of Thunder. These rings also always come with a decent amount of lightning damage, resistance, and intelligence on them. And for this build, intelligence is very important because buffs like Wrath and Herald of Thunder require a lot of intelligence, making these rings the perfect fit. I've also added another unique to the build, and I have to say this one has been a real game changer. We're now using Voice of the Storm as our amulet, which also provides quite a lot of intelligence. And most importantly, it causes lightning damage from our non-critical hits to be lucky. And since this is a non-crit build, every hit becomes lucky for us. This also allows us to take full advantage of volatility support as it completely counters its downside. Lastly, for our weapon, I've swapped out Brain Rattler for a rare mace. Although Brain Rattler served me very well throughout early to end game, a rare mace is simply better at this stage, as I already have a lot of lightning penetration in this build through conductivity, so that part of Brain Rattler is no longer impactful. I also now have a high chance to shock, and the lightning damage on its own is more than enough to inflict powerful shocks. However, making this swap comes with a downside. We no longer are converting all of our damage to lightning, so we are left with 2 options. Either we use physical to lightning support and sacrifice a support slot, or we do the smarter thing and use a Watcher's Eye with a Wrath modifier that converts 40% of physical damage to lightning, and the remaining 10% can be obtained from a Glove Implicit, saving us that valuable support slot. On top of all this, I've also made significant changes to the skill tree itself. I've completely revamped and optimized it to save a lot of skill points, and I've invested those points into cluster jewels, specifically lightning and herald cluster jewels. For the lightning cluster jewel, I'm using an 8 passive large cluster jewel with overshock, prismatic heart, and widespread destruction. If you cannot find a Megalomaniac with these exact knots, get a Megalomaniac with Overlord, and then use a rare small reservation cluster for electric presence. There's also the Watcher's Eye I had mentioned earlier. You will need at least 35% physical damage converted to lightning. Lastly, I've socketed a Light of Meaning Jewel for increased lightning damage near stamina. This jewel is completely optional, as it only provides a bit more damage and is quite expensive. This covers almost everything I want to tell you guys about the budget version of this build, which will cost around 10 to 15 divines depending on whether you skip the Light of Meaning Jewel. For more information, you can check out my mobilities guide, which is much more detailed. With this version, you can comfortably do tier 16 maps, pinnacle bosses, and even nightmare maps with a little bit of difficulty. However, you cannot do over bosses or extremely juiced endgame content. For that, we will need to transition this build into a crit version and add even more defensive and damage layers. So now, let's talk about the plans for the min-max version of this build. Currently, the build is non-crit and we are using maces. But for the min-max version, we are going to turn this into a crit build and use staves instead, as staves inherently have very high critical strike chance and are great for critical builds as they have a lot of critical modifiers available. So, to start with, we will first craft a staff using an Eventuality Rod with Shaper Influence as the base. This base already gives us maximum endurance charges in its implicit, and we can even roll maximum endurance charge as a suffix on the staff itself, increasing our maximum endurance charges to 12. Then we will get Ralakish Impatience corrupted with +1 maximum endurance charge as an implicit, pushing our endurance charges to 13. After that, we will allocate Unseen Hand from King of the Mist for another ring slot, allowing us to equip an additional ring with a maximum endurance charge, pushing our endurance charges to a maximum of 14. For this, we will sacrifice our utility flask, and we will also swap out our unique endurance charge rings with rare ones, which have maximum endurance charge as an implicit. This will give us a total of 14 brutal charges, which translates to 42% chance to deal triple damage. If we combine this with Foul Bond's Magnaut Vice Gloves and the 200 mastery for triple damage, we will have a massive 60% chance to deal triple damage. We will also swap out Voice of the Storm with Strangle Grasp, and overall I will improve the rest of the gear as well. I'm also going to heavily revamp the entire skill tree, and we will use Elegant Hubris Legion Jewel and allocate the Supreme Ostentation Keystone, which removes all attribute requirements and even allows to use not like Eternal Dominus, which provides increased damage per endurance charge. And since we will no longer need attributes, we can replace every single attribute not on the skill tree with tattoos. Lastly, I'm going to imbue Holy Sweep with either endurance charge or melee stun or increased critical strike support, as we can get most benefit from these even at level 1. The min-max version of this build is not going to be cheap at all. It might cost like 100 or even over 200 divines. But as I promised you guys, I will push this build to Ubers and show you the true potential of this build. So in the next update, which will also be the final update, I will provide you guys with a full build guide and showcase for the min-max version of this build. But it will take me some time to get all of that done. So until then, you can follow me on Twitch to stay updated on how the build is progressing. I still think I can make more improvements to the budget version of this build as well. So keep an eye on Mobilitics guide for any changes. If you like these type of off-meta trash builds, make sure to complete all the formalities by liking, subscribing, and even ringing the notification bell. And do not forget to favorite the build on Mobilitics if you're following it. As always, thanks for watching Exile.